15 past the hour or more on our breaking coverage of a major legal standoff unfolding between the White House and the courts. A federal judge now says he has found probable cause to hold the administration in criminal contempt over deportation flights it sent to El Salvador last month after the president invoked the Alien Enemies Act. In his opinion, U.S. District Judge James Boasberg wrote, quote, "The Constitution does not tolerate willful disobedience of judicial orders, especially by officials of a coordinate branch who have sworn an oath to uphold it." Joining us now is Lee Gelernt, lead attorney arguing this case on behalf of the plaintiffs. He is a deputy director of the Immigrants' Rights Project. Lee, it's always a pleasure to see you. What do you make of the judge's finding probable cause to hold the administration in criminal contempt?
Yeah, I think this is a long time coming. I think a couple of points are worth noting. First of all, Judge Boasberg has been very patient and given the government multiple opportunities to explain themselves. And not only have they refused, but they're telling the judge he can't even look at information in chambers, even though he has top security clearance. So I think he finally reached the point where he felt like he needed to do something. And I think what he's doing is essentially standing up for the courts, the role of the courts in our democracy, and saying we need to be a part of this and you can't defy my orders. But I think the other part that's fundamental is he gave the government a choice. He said, either take the stand and explain yourself or bring these men back who were sent to a notorious Salvadoran prison, as you all have been talking about in the prior segment, and they were sent there without due process. Let's be clear about that. And that's where our overriding focus is. Obviously, there are large issues about the role of the courts here, but right now we are laser focused on getting these men back who are sitting maybe perhaps for the rest of their lives in this brutal Salvadoran prison, who were sent there, again, without any due process. So we hope the government does the right thing and brings them back, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. They've already appealed. Within hours, they appealed Judge Boasberg's order.
And so, Lee, are you asking for ideally every single one of those hundreds of people that were sent to El Salvador to be brought back to the United States for what?
So to have their due process hearings. And I want to be clear about what the issues are. First of all, we're saying that no one can be sent out of the country based on a wartime authority during peacetime. This is a law that was meant only for military conflicts and has therefore only been used 3 times in our country's history: the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. So no one can be sent out of the country, much less to the Salvadoran prison, based on this wartime authority. But the second point we're saying is, at a minimum, they have to have hearings and due process. The evidence is now emerging that most, perhaps maybe almost all of them, have no ties to this gang, but none of them had any ability to contest their inclusion under this wartime law. So we are asking that they all be brought back and given due process, and let the judicial process work its way through the courts.
Lee, what level of responsibility or of authority does the U.S. government have with people who were already deported and who are already outside of the United States, and in this case of the people that we're speaking about here, Lee, that are not American citizens when they were sent to another country?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked about that, because to begin with, the Supreme Court already in this case has rejected the government's argument that they're not entitled to due process. The Supreme Court squarely held that they're entitled to due process. Now, the government's arguing, well, they're in El Salvador, we can't do anything about it. Of course they can. Everyone knows that they can bring them back if they want. We're paying for that facility, and these are Venezuelan men who El Salvador has no connection to. They're holding them solely at the behest of the United States, and we are paying for it. So I hope that if the court says they need to be brought back, the government will listen.
And so there have been other instances in our history where people have been deported to a country that is not a country of their birth. And I'm thinking of what's happened, for example, with Venezuelans specifically, when the Maduro regime has not accepted them at different times. But this is not unusual. What is unusual is that they were placed in jails. I mean, just recently we were seeing cases in Panama when people were sent there who were not Panamanians by the U.S. government, and the Panamanians put them up in a hotel for a couple of days, and then we haven't really seen what happened to them.
Well, exactly. And so we are actually, the ACLU with our partners are suing over that as well because they did not get screenings and were sent to Panama without any due process. But here we have a situation where these individuals were sent to El Salvador, again, without any screening, and we know that they're going to be potentially tortured. So at a minimum, they have to be screened for torture. And there's a very clear process if you're going to send someone to a third country. That process was not followed. All due process was shed and they were sent there. So you're right. Sometimes people can be sent to a third country, but only after extensive process to make sure they're not going to be in harm's way there, and certainly not sent directly to a foreign prison.
Yeah, I mean, are you sure that in the past there has been really that consistent and insistent process when they send people away? I'm not so sure that that's the case.
Well, certainly not under the Trump administration. And you're right, there have been instances like that, but they've been sort of isolated instances. Here, there seems like a systematic attempt by the Trump administration to avoid all due process and send these individuals to where they may spend the rest of their lives in, as you've pointed out, many times in a brutal prison where torture is commonplace.
Lee Gelernt, I thank you very much. I appreciate it.